Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're going into a really dark place. We're opening the collected sources on Ladislav Hojer. For anyone in the former Czechoslovakia, that name is, well, it's synonymous with a truly chilling, primitive kind of evil.
It really is. We're talking about one of the most brutal serial killers to operate behind the Iron Curtain in the entire 20th century.
In this deep dive, it's a challenging one, isn't it? I mean, largely because of the setting.
Oh, absolutely. These crimes, we're talking serial murder, sadistic assault, even cannibalism. They all happened between 1978 and 1981. This was the peak of the so-called normalization period in the Czechoslovak Socialist Republic, the CSSR.
Right.
And for many of you listening outside of that region, the Cold War might just seem political. But what we see here is it's this extreme depravity, and it's flourishing in a society that officially claimed it had stamped out that kind of evil.
So our mission today is to go way beyond just a timeline of the terror. We've brought together everything we could find, rare police memos, and, crucially, the incredibly detailed recollections of the man who caught him, Chief Investigator Jiří Markovič.
And that's the key. We want to understand the psychological reality of Hojer himself, this vacant, low-intellect killer, but also the extraordinary, almost existential effort it took for the police and a communist state to even admit a monster like him existed, let alone stop him.
Markovich's own words really set the tone here, don't they? He didn't see Hojer as a man at first.
Not at all. He described the initial feeling as confronting a distant specter. When the details of the mutilations came out, he said he was facing a monster with an unfathomable mind. And that atmosphere of just chilling, inexplicable evil is what we need to explore today.
Okay, so before we even get to Hojer himself, let's properly set the stage. For our listeners who know very little about the CSSR in the late 70s, what was daily life like? How did that environment shape the reality of violent crime?
Well, the key concept you have to get your head around is false security. The state, the Communist Party ran everything, and I mean everything. That meant a total monopoly on information.
So what you saw in the news was all you were allowed to see.
Precisely. And the official narrative was that because socialism was inherently just and moral, these profound individualistic evils like sadistic serial murder, they just didn't happen. They couldn't. They were a product of the decadent West.
So if a horrific crime did happen, I mean, it must have. How did the system deal with that contradiction?
Heavy censorship and very controlled language. Major violent crimes were either buried completely, or if they were too big to ignore, they were minimized.
They wouldn't call it what it was.
No. The terms serial killer or sadist were politically inconvenient. A murder would be framed as an isolated incident, maybe a personal dispute gone wrong. This systemic denial meant that police forces were just structurally and psychologically unprepared to link crimes happening in different cities.
That kind of structural failure. It must have handed Hojer a massive advantage, even if he didn't realize it.
It was the perfect hunting ground. If the police in Prague weren't really talking to the police in Brno or Košice about this type of crime, he could just travel and kill with impunity.
And people felt safe.
People felt safe because the state told them they were safe. And that makes the reality of what Hojer was doing in the shadows even more shocking when it finally started to come out.
Okay, let's introduce the man himself, Ladislav Hojer.
Born March 15, 1958. He was executed by hanging at Pankrak prison in Prague on August 7, 1986. A very short, brutal life. He died at just 28 years old.
And the official classification in the files.
Simple and chilling. Czech sadistic serial killer and cannibal.
The numbers are staggering. 5 confirmed murders. But he confessed to 18 rapes, or attempted rapes, all across Czechoslovakia.
Yeah.
Prague, Chain, Košice, Brno. So what do the sources tell us about his background? Where did this pathology come from?
His early life was really defined by loss and struggle. His father died of cancer in 1969, his mother the same in 1979. He was left quite isolated. He attended what the sources call a special school and trained as a glazier.
And his intellect. This is a crucial point.
It is. His measured IQ was 88.
So an IQ of 88, that puts him right on the cusp, doesn't it? It's the low end of average intelligence, but he's certainly not intellectually deficient in a way that would make him legally unaware of his actions.
Not at all. And it's key understanding his crimes. It explains the primitive nature of his motivation. He wasn't a meticulous planner like some killers you hear about. He had a kind of brutish, opportunistic cunning, but he just lacked the capacity for complex deception.
So this very primitive psychology, combined with what the sources describe as an intense sexual inadequacy, that's the core of it.
That's the engine of his violence. The sources are very clear on this. He was a complete loner, never had a single serious consensual relationship in his life. And the humiliation from that failure, it became the fuel for his sadism.
And there are two incidents in the sources that just perfectly illustrate this failure. The first one, the dating ad. It's almost tragically pathetic.
It really is. I mean, he actually made a genuine effort to connect with someone. He answered a personal ad. But the woman who showed up, she was expecting someone older, more established. Hojer arrives tall, thin, unkempt, with what the sources call a klativa gait.
Klativa gait. What does that mean for our listeners?
It means an awkward, shambling, unsteady walk. His whole appearance, his crude manner, just instantly repelled her. She made an excuse and left within minutes. It was a swift, brutal public rejection.
And he would have internalized that completely.
Oh, absolutely. And the second incident is even more telling. It shows how he couldn't handle actual intimacy. His friends, trying to help him out, arranged for a young woman at a party to try and seduce him.
Okay.
And when she actually did it, when she became active, took her clothes off and initiated sex, the moment of voluntary female desire, Hojer completely panicked.
He didn't just run away, did he? He got violent.
Brutally violent. He threw her so hard she crashed through a glass door panel. And then he fled, just overcome with rage and humiliation. His psyche couldn't handle a scenario where he wasn't in total objectifying control.
So consensual sex was terrifying to him.
Terrifying. Dominance and sadism were his only paths to feeling powerful. So his outward demeanor was passive, insecure. But inside, all that rejection was festering into this toxic, vulgar contempt for women.
He started living in his imagination.
Completely. He would constantly fantasize about scenarios where a woman was totally helpless, begging for her life. That was the only way he could achieve any sense of sexual self-worth. It all boiled down to this primitive drive, which he later summarized in court with a phrase that just, it chills you to the bone.
When the cock stands up, the brain stops.
Exactly. The total shutdown of all ethical and intellectual functions in the face of his impulse.
The capture of a killer like this, so mobile, it always seems to come down to luck.
Yeah.
Or just exceptional police work. In Hojer's case, it was. It was a bizarre mix of both, wasn't it?
A very bizarre mix. It really comes down to his one major operational failure. The murder of Anaha.
The final victim.
His final victim. Anaha was 51 years old, murdered on October 3rd, 1981. And the location here is the critical piece of the puzzle. It happened in Motal in Prague.
Right near his home.
Unbelievably close, only about 300 meters from his apartment. For a predator who had traveled hundreds of kilometers to find victims, this was a profound, almost stupid lapse in judgment.
He waited for an hour near a bridge over the Matolsky stream. He attacked her, sexually assaulted her, and then strangled her with her own stocking to prevent identification.
And killing so close to home, it just shattered his internal world. The sources say he was deeply disturbed by it. He couldn't compartmentalize it like the others. And this pressure started showing. He began drinking heavily, which was very unusual for him.
And amazingly, he started talking. He didn't keep it a secret.
No, he confessed multiple times in his favorite pub, Pod Homolku. The landlord later testified that Hojer was drinking so much they had to carry him out. He'd boast about the murder, but no one believed him.
Nobody. He was known as the local oddball, the harmless fool. Everyone, even the local police who knew him, just dismissed it as drunken nonsense, maybe delirium tremens.
So the actual break in the case, it comes from this monumental piece of luck involving a completely unrelated man.
Pure dumb luck. The police initially arrested a man named Yaroslav Donat who was mentally ill and had falsely confessed to the murder. They cleared him immediately. He was in an institution at the time of the crime. But Markovich's team was meticulous. They asked him, "How did you know about this?"
And Donat knew a detail that hadn't been released to the public?
The crucial detail. He knew the victim was strangled with her own pantyhose. The police had deliberately withheld that.
Wow.
And when they pressed him, Donat told them his friend, Ladislav Hojer, had taken him to the crime scene and boasted, using those exact words. "I killed that woman here, strangled her with her own pantyhose." That was it. That was the moment the net closed. Hojer was arrested on February 11, 1982. And this is where he falls into the hands of Chief Investigator Jerzy Markovich. And Markovich methods, they were radical for that time and place.
Absolutely. Markovich saw right away that Hojer physically was this imposing figure. He fit the old Lombroso criminal type. But psychologically, he was simple. Markovitch sensed immediately that Hojer just did not have the intellectual stamina to maintain a complex lie.
So the strategy wasn't coercion, it was patience.
Exhausting patience. The interrogation was a marathon. It started at 10 p.m. and ran for 8 solid hours until 6 a.m. the next morning.
An 8-hour interrogation.
Yes, and Markovitch described Hojer speaking incredibly slowly with tics and head tremors, these long, agonizing pauses. But the genius of the method was that they didn't push him. Markovitch famously said, "We didn't push him to confess. They just let the silence draw the truth out."
It's a fascinating irony, isn't it? In a state that was defined by forced confessions and coercion, the breakthrough here comes from an approach that is the complete opposite.
It is. It was the difference between investigation and just getting compliance. They took coffee breaks. Hojer, who for the first time in his life had someone actually willing to listen to him, just began to open up. He started talking about his loneliness, his failures with women, all the humiliation.
And he confessed to the murder of Anna.
Oh, he did, piece by painful piece, in these crude, objectifying terms. He never used her name, just referred to her costume, her figure, but he confirmed the details.
And how solid was the forensic evidence they used to back up this slow confession?
It was meticulous, a real testament to their work once they had a target. First, they found microscopic textile particles, fibers from Hojer's specific jacket and trousers on the victim's clothes, and fibers from her clothes on his.
A direct physical link.
A direct link. Second, his blood type was AM, which is quite rare. It matched the semen and saliva found at the scene.
And then there was the weapon, the knife he used to cut her clothing, which really speaks to his specific sadistic fixation.
Yes, the knife. It was a specialized, curved grafting knife, a shtiparsky nóż. This isn't a normal knife. It's a tool for extremely precise horticultural cuts. And Hojer was obsessed with how sharp it was.
He was proud of it.
Immensely proud. He boasted to the investigators about it, showing them how the edge was so perfect it would literally stick to a fingertip. And you see this obsession with a perfectly sharpened, precise tool being used for this random, devastating mutilation. It's a classic sign of his particular brand of sadism.
So once Hojer confessed to the Anna murder, Markovitch had this strong intuition. A killer this cold, this effective, this can't be his first time.
Exactly. He just knew it. So he made this huge psychological gamble. He simply asked Hojer to write down everything else he had ever done, no matter how small.
And Hojer did it.
He did. About a week later, he came back with a handwritten list. 14 offenses. Most of it was minor stuff, exhibitionism, a few attempted rapes, but one entry just. It screamed at them from the page.
It was dated December 1980, Brno rape. And it was marked with a simple cross.
And when Markovitch asked him what the cross meant, Hojer gave this chillingly simple euphemism. "That girl remains stiff under my hands."
My gosh.
He was a month off on the date. It was actually January 30th, 1981. But that one line led investigators straight to the unsolved murder of an 18-year-old girl in Brno, Ivana Matlova. And this is where we see Hojer's sadism reach its absolute peak.
Tell us about the circumstances of that murder.
Ivana Matlova was returning home from a zoo ball, a night of celebration. Hojer, meanwhile, was at his lowest. He'd just been kicked off a train for not having a ticket, which just amplified his sense of humiliation. He saw her at a tram stop, followed her into a park, and attacked.
And the post-mortem from that Brno case described a level of brutality that went far beyond just the strangulation.
Far beyond. The physical expression of sadism was terrifying. Ivana had 39 separate superficial stab wounds. The pathologist noted they were inflicted after she was already dead or dying. It was what they called a delight in devastation.
And her valuables were untouched.
Untouched. Money, jewelry, her watch, all left behind. This was purely about destruction, not robbery.
And then came the confession that it shocked the entire Czechoslovakian judicial system.
Yeah.
The post-mortem mutilation and the cannibalism.
Markovitch was very careful here. He didn't read the Brno file until Hojer confessed the core details himself. And Hojer lied at first. He said he'd cut off her breasts and genitals with that grafting knife and thrown them in the river.
But then he told the truth.
He did. In this moment of bizarre, warped trust with Markovitch, he said, "I'm afraid to tell the truth. I didn't want you to look at me like a hungry tiger, for you not to think I'm crazy or a cannibal."
The reality of what he did, it's almost impossible to process.
He took the severed parts home in a plastic bag. He stored them in his refrigerator, and he confessed to using them for sexual self-gratification over the next week.
What does that even mean?
He would place the dead, severed genitals on his own penis while touching the breasts. He was trying to mentally relive the murder, to recapture that feeling of absolute power he felt in that moment.
And the actual act of cannibalism,
Yeah.
was that part of the ritual? Or was it just about getting rid of the evidence?
The sources suggest it was this bizarre, almost pathetic mix of both. After about a week, the parts were decaying. He confessed that he shaved the outer genitals, boiled them in heavily salted water, and then he tried to eat a portion.
He tried to eat.
He seasoned the human meat with French mustard and horseradish. He said he found the taste immediately repulsive, disagreeable, so he flushed the rest down the toilet and threw away the pot.
Wait, the man commits this unspeakable act of depravity, mutilates a human body, and then he treats it like a failed cooking experiment. He seasons human remains with French mustard. The juxtaposition of that sheer horror with that bizarre domesticity it's clinically terrifying.
It shows the profound disconnect in his primitive mind. He was trying to dispose of the evidence. Maybe he had some psychotic urge to complete the degradation, but the act itself was a failure. He didn't enjoy it. It was just the culmination of his compulsion, which again, he explained with his motto, "When the cock stands up, the brain stops."
Okay, let's trace this journey of horror back to the beginning. Using Hojer's confessions and Markovich's reconstructions, let's go back to his very first confirmed murder in 1978.
That was the murder of Eva Rolanova in Deshin, November 1978. Hojer was only 20 years old, just starting down this path. He claimed he traveled there to see the beauties of our country, but also to look for a woman. Eva was 29. He found her walking alone after she'd had an argument with her husband.
He attacked her, strangled her, and masturbated over the body. But there was a detail, a signature, that confirmed this was the beginning of his sadistic career.
The final humiliation. Before he left, he took a nettle, a common stinging weed, and inserted it into her exposed genitals. This act inflicting one last little sting of pain and degradation on the dead body. It's a classic sign of his deep-seated misogyny.
And what's incredible is how the police confirmed this detail almost 5 years later.
It highlights Hojer's almost photographic memory for locations. During the reconstruction in 1983, he located the exact spot of the attack to within 2 meters. He described changes in the terrain, the location of a dumpster, even a specific blackberry branch he'd scratched himself on. This spatial memory was proof for Markovich that he wasn't making it up.
Okay, next we have the crime that really grabbed public attention at the time, even though Hojer's name was nowhere near it. The train murder of Ivona Kringlova in February 1980.
This was a huge story. The victim was a 25-year-old medical student traveling alone on an overnight express train. Hojer was on the same train, a soldier on leave. And the method he used here really shows his specific primitive skill set.
He didn't have to force his way into the train toilet.
No, he waited for her to go inside. Then he used a common FAB key, a standard key for the entire Czechoslovak railway system, to unlock the door from the outside. He just turned the latch from occupied to vacant and walked in.
And he demonstrated this.
Yeah, chillingly. During the reconstruction, he showed them how he did it. It took him 6 seconds. He strangled her with her own scarf and his fingers. Then he threw one of her boots out the window to try and confuse the investigation.
And we need to pause here because the investigation that followed was so intense. It had devastating consequences for innocent people, didn't it? It connects right back to that climate of fear in the CSSR.
Absolutely. The police were under immense pressure to solve this high-profile crime. They interviewed 46 of the 47 estimated passengers on that train. Hojer, the soldier on leave, was the uncounted 47th. And this pressure, it trickled down.
The fear of being a suspect.
The fear of being a suspect, or even just failing to cooperate properly with the state police, was terrifying for ordinary people. And tragically, it led to 2 suicides. A railway worker who was questioned took his own life, and a distant relative of the victim, whose grief was apparently deemed inappropriate by investigators, also later hanged himself. It just shows how the climate of the regime magnified the consequences.
Finally, we get to the most frustrating case for Markovich. The unidentified victim from the Ruzhin Reservoir near Koche in August 1980.
Hojer was on another military leave. He went to the scenic reservoir, saw an isolated woman, and attacked her from behind. He confessed that he had an early ejaculation, so he immediately lost sexual interest, and his focus shifted entirely to disposal.
And the disposal was primitive, but effective.
Very. He found some wire nearby, wrapped up the body, weighed it down with heavy stone, and sank it in the reservoir. And what really shows his complete detachment is that immediately after dumping her body, he went for a recreational swim in that same reservoir.
Just a total disconnect.
A hallmark of his amoral psychopathy. The body was found 14 months later, in October 1981, headless and handless from decomposition. And this case really highlighted some police failures in Slovakia.
What went wrong?
Markovic was highly critical of the initial investigation. They found a Prim watch on the victim's wrist, a very common Czechoslovak brand. This could have been a key lead. Watchmakers often etched tiny repair codes inside the casing.
Right, which could have identified her.
Exactly. But one of the investigators later threw the watch away because, in his words, it smelled. He destroyed the single best piece of evidence. And to this day, that victim remains unidentified.
And the reconstruction of this crime was particularly strange because Markovic himself had to step in and play the part of the victim.
Yes, he said his Koshi colleagues were being uncooperative, so he had to take this extreme measure. He personally served as the live model, having Hojer demonstrate how he bound him with the wire. Markovic described it as a true European rarity in criminal investigation, the lead detective playing the victim for the serial killer.
So after all of this, 5 murders, sadism, cannibalism, what did the team of psychiatric experts conclude about Hojer's mind?
The diagnosis was definitive. He was a primitive psychopath with an amoral, antisocial personality, schizoid features, and aggressive tendencies.
Let's unpack that a bit. The primitive part refers to his low IQ and his crude emotional landscape.
Correct. Amoral and antisocial confirm the complete lack of a conscience. And the schizoid features, that explains the intense emotional flatness and detachment.
Which is how he could go swimming after a murder.
Or store human remains in his fridge like groceries without feeling genuine disgust or remorse. His IQ of 88 meant he wasn't impaired enough to be considered not responsible, but he was emotionally just vacant. The court confirmed he acted with intact consciousness. He knew exactly what he was doing.
And the expert said his cruelty was functional for him.
It was. It filled that void left by his sexual inadequacy. It gave him the sense of self-confidence, a sense of masculinity and power that he craved.
And during his time in custody, his logic was so twisted, he seemed to enjoy the attention.
He literally called it his holidays. For the first time in his life, he was the center of attention. All these professionals were focused entirely on him. He reveled in it.
He even made these dark, satirical suggestions to Markovic.
Unbelievable. Markovic told a story about passing 2 female hitchhikers. Hojer, completely serious, said, "Stop, I'll fucking kill those girls, and you can close the case quickly." His language was always so primitive. He'd call victims a slut. He wouldn't say he killed them. He'd say, "I took away her oxygen."
He did briefly try to take back his confessions, didn't he? Why?
It was a last-ditch survival attempt. In court, he claimed he was sleep-deprived and psychologically coerced. He said he was afraid of psychological torture, though he admitted no one ever laid a hand on him.
But the evidence was just overwhelming.
The court dismissed it instantly. His confessions contained dozens of details only the killer could know. The specific knife, the nettle into chin, the FAB key on the train, the gruesome specifics of the cannibalism. His guilt was absolute.
And the process moved quickly from there.
He was sentenced to death on November 9th, 1984. All his appeals were denied. President Gustav Husak refused clemency on July 4th, 1986.
Despite all the bravado he showed in custody, his final moments were not brave at all.
Not in the slightest. The execution records from August 7, 1986 are very clear. Hojer was absolutely terrified of death. He fought the executioners violently, even broke a finger on the hangman's assistant's hand.
And the final detail.
The final visceral detail recorded in the sources is that he defecated himself right before he was hanged. His end was defined by the same primitive terror and physical degradation that he inflicted on his victims.
What makes this case so resonant is that deeply personal, paradoxical bond that formed between Markovic and Hojer. An almost fatherly relationship with a cannibalistic psychopath.
The bond was one-sided, but it was profound. Markovic said Hojer chose him as a substitute family. Hojer had lost both his parents, he was totally isolated, and he trusted Markovic implicitly. He saw the investigator as the only person who would ever truly listen to him.
And the anecdotes about that bond are just, they're stunning.
They are. On one long car ride, Hojer, who wasn't in handcuffs, just rested his head on Markovic's shoulder and fell asleep. His own defense lawyer said he wouldn't have believed it if he hadn't seen it with his own eyes.
And there was the time he sent his lawyer out of the room.
Yes. He said he needed to tell Major Markovic a dark secret, alone. Markovic leans in, expecting a confession to another murder. And Hojer just whispers, "I need to pee very badly."
It perfectly encapsulates his primitive mind. Sharing the horror of boiling human remains was less embarrassing to him than admitting a simple bodily need.
The trust was absolute. And that trust deeply affected Markovich. He carried the moral burden of sending the only person who had ever truly trusted him to the gallows.
He confessed to feeling guilt over it. He's personally against the death penalty.
He is. He always wished Hojer had gotten a life sentence with forced psychiatric care. He stressed, "I only gathered the evidence. He was convicted by the court, not by me." He felt Hojer deserved the harsh punishment, but that the death penalty was a final failure to address the sickness.
And the investigation was officially closed with 5 victims, but Markovich was convinced there were more.
He was sure of it. He believed there were at least 2 more victims. He had taped statements of Hojer saying chilling things like, "The chain of murders was not finished, and I see many more corpses." Markovich felt the pattern was incomplete.
But the investigation was shut down from above. Why stop if the lead investigator thinks there are more victims out there?
It was a mix of fear and pragmatism. The authorities saw that Hojer was starting to read crime reports and hear stories from other inmates. They were afraid he would start confessing to crimes he didn't commit just to prolong his life in custody and stay in the spotlight. The order came down. Stop pursuing speculative leads. Protect the integrity of the 5 convictions you already have.
To put Hojer's primitive drive into a wider context, Markovich compared him to another, much more intelligent sadist he interviewed, known only as Engineer T.
Yes, and that comparison is fascinating. Engineer T was university educated. He could actually articulate the internal process of his sadistic drive, something Hojer was too simple to do. He used this military analogy of a targeting radar.
The targeting radar.
Engineer T explained that a sadist always has this preliminary radar scanning their surroundings. When a potential target is noticed, the targeting radar activates and their focus narrows. And he said that once that focus locks entirely onto the target, there is no turning back. The attack becomes compulsive. It can't be stopped.
So Hojer, the primitive psychopath, he lacked that self-awareness, but his low IQ meant he just went straight from that preliminary scan to an unstoppable impulse.
Exactly. He was pure, raw impulse, driven by that one simple motto. He didn't have the mental capacity for that internal conflict that someone like Engineer T described. Hojer's evil was defined by this primitive, amoral emptiness, and it was amplified by this intense sexual humiliation he felt his entire life.
So the case of Ladislav Hojer, it really illustrates this chilling reality that true monstrosity isn't always marked by high intelligence or some master plan. Here was a low IQ glazier who became a traveling sadist and a cannibal, operating in the shadows of a communist state that desperately pretended people like him couldn't exist.
And the most profound, unsettling takeaway from all the sources is Markovich's unresolved doubt. Given Hojer's own statements about seeing many more corpses and the known weaknesses of the police structure at the time, you have to ask, how many silent victims of this primitive psychopath are still out there? Unnamed, undiscovered, just lying in the archived history of the Czechoslovak Socialist Republic.
The investigation was closed to prevent lies, but in doing so, it left this permanent, chilling question mark hanging over the true limits of human cruelty when it's completely divorced from conscience. A truly chilling thought for you to consider long after this deep dive is over. Thank you for joining us.